Welcome to the Hard Truth of the B2B e-commerce podcast. It's Isaiah Bollinger back again on episode 127. I think, Tim, we missed a few weeks. I know the summer's tough. A lot of people cancel on us in the summer last minute. So
Summer is like that. People are on vacation, conferences, whatever it is, or they just want to run to the beach instead of being interviewed. So I totally understand that. So let me give a couple shout outs. First of all, hey, it's Timothy Peterson. Today I'm not in New York. I'm in Baltimore. I am visiting some clients down here, doing some family visits as well, having a good time. And last week it was Chicago, so we didn't record then, but I was visiting folks out there. So all fun all over the country for us. So a couple people I want to give a shout out to listeners: David Navarro, Joshua Tippergan, Betsy Emery Martin, Robert Sussman, Mike Giamuso. We've got a long list of people who listen, and I love hearing from them. So find me on LinkedIn, find me however you want to find me. I would love to just say hi and thank you for that. And just to remind our listeners too, we get people from all over the world. I love that. It's really great that we're hearing from people in Australia, from the Middle East, from Europe. Keep it up. We're helping to continue to be useful. So one pause here, and then I'm going to throw it back to Isaiah to introduce our guest so we can insert our sponsor ad.
Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance.
Isaiah, please introduce our guest.
yeah, I'm excited to introduce Chris Pierre, who's the founder and I believe also CEO of Sync Show, B2B online marketing agency. And you also, I think you have a book on B2B marketing and just a lot of experience working with manufacturing, distribution, just B2B, the B2B companies that generally we're trying to talk to on this podcast. And so, yeah, we're excited to have you and learn from you. So,
well, thanks, Isaiah. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.
yeah, tell us a little bit about how you got into this, or I assume that wasn't your initial goal in life. Usually it's not for most people when they're like a kid, I guess, starting one of these businesses. But
Yeah, my background, so I went to school for graphic design and always wanted to be in the marketing design world. But I had this interest in starting my own agency pretty early on, like in early college. And then my father was in manufacturing. He was like a turnaround guy. So American Greetings would hire him to turn around companies that they'd purchase. And so manufacturing is just always in my blood. And then when I finally started the agency, it was more coincidence than anything. One of our first clients was a golf ball manufacturer. And just fell in love with working with the industrial companies. So here we are 22 years later. I've been running and founded a company called Sync Show. And we focus on B2B industrial companies, as you mentioned, Isaiah.
And
So,
from a marketing standpoint, I assume that's SEO, email marketing, paid out. Like, what are some of the things that you guys do?
yeah, so we think of ourselves primarily as, a holistic marketing company. However, we really prioritize strategy over tactical implementation. So tactical implementation is the byproduct of the strategy.
Yeah.
So yes, we do search engine optimization, content marketing, social media, conversion rate optimization, paid advertising. We're also HubSpot Platinum partners. But what's really critical for us is that our clients work with us to develop a comprehensive marketing strategy and implement our methodology, which is what my book was about.
Cool.
And just so you know, I did take a look at the summary of your book. I have not read your book, so I do have actually a list of the eight pillars. So I do have that handy, so we can always go back to it if you don't cover them all.
I think we
But
should. I think we should try and cover them, or at least maybe, have a brief summary of them. But yeah, why don't it sounds like these eight pillars are some of the kind of principles of what you've learned along the way. I'd love to just maybe if you could like summarize that for people kind of new to marketing and B2B.
Sure. So I'll tell you a little backstory, if you don't mind, just on how they came to be, because
Sure.
I think it's important. So about 17, 18 years into the business, I had hired a new VP of client services. His name is John Daters. And John was getting acclimated with SyncShow and our clients and reading our case studies. And this is going back like 4 years ago. And he said, hey, he walked in my office one day and he said, hey, Chris, are these case studies for real? Because I've worked at several other agencies. And he's like, I've never seen these kinds of results before. And I said, well, of course they're real. Like we're not lying in our marketing.
I hope not.
But I said,
I hope not.
I'm like, John, I need you to believe in these, being my VP, you need to believe in these. But I said, why don't you go out and look at all of our clients' data and get back to me with your analysis? And a couple months later, he walked in my office and I had forgotten that I had asked him to do it. And he said, hey, I looked at all that data. And he's like, our average client is doing better than many of our case studies. He's like, what are we doing? How are we doing this? And I knew that we did strategy first. I knew that we approached every client unique to their, place in marketing, but I couldn't answer the question, and it was kind of embarrassing. And so he's like, "We got to figure this out."
I'll admit we've had some of the same challenges where you do stuff and you get really good at it, but sometimes it's not as easy as you think to explain because we do sometimes 1,000, 2,000, or even 4,000 hour projects, on the larger end. Some are much smaller. It's hard to explain like what goes into that. And like we'll try to do some little basic slideshows and a PDF, and it doesn't do justice to like the depth of, what we do. And we're actively working on better explaining what we do. So
well, and why you do what you do
yeah.
at specific points for each client. So, and every company is different in their journey for marketing and sales.
Yeah.
Do they have full-time staff? Do they outsource? Do they have any marketing?
Yeah.
Are they marketing immature? Are they marketing mature? So we spent 2.5 years or so going through every client and company history and looking at what made them successful or why they failed at marketing. And we thought when we went on this journey, it was going to boil down to marketing tactics. Like, did they do better social media, or did they have a better website, or things like that? And what we were surprised at is that when we finally boiled it down to the 8 core areas, they had more to do with your marketing operational infrastructure than they did the tactics you were implementing, which was like this huge aha moment, because most marketing agencies and most marketers that you hire are going to jump straight to tactics. And they think that if they continue to do more of those tactics, they'll get better results. We call that whack-a-mole style marketing.
What I would interject just for a second is, I've been a CMO and I've been a COO, right? I've done both of these things. And so I love being operational and, strategic, at the same time, right? But what's funny is I've always felt there was a disconnect between agencies and sort of education and marketing, right? Because I do marketing crash courses. I'll teach people like how to do marketing, and it's really the 8 pillars, right? I mean, I'm going through, these are the things you need to consider. These are all the things that you have to do, what you have to be thinking about. And then they go, spin off and they want to pick like search engine marketing, or, you know what I mean? We'll do like one thing. And it's kind of funny that that's the case. You need to remind people of this.
Yeah, and Tim, as you mentioned that, I've had a number of people read the book and go, this isn't like anything new,
No,
but why isn't anybody doing it?
exactly. That's what I
Yeah, no,
felt. I
this
was
is
like, oh,
Well, I
this is
think
common
I
sense,
can
yeah.
kind of answer that, right? And I think part of the reason is that getting the foundations in place takes time and doesn't immediately produce ROI. And I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of the reason why these B2B companies are just constantly spinning their wheels or jumping from agency to agency or, making, off the cuff decisions that are often bad. And it's because I think to get proper marketing infrastructure foundation in place, plus, especially if you want to layer in the e-commerce side of things like that we do around, on B2B, which is frankly more complicated than B2C, B2B edition of BigCommerce or using B2B Shopify or Magento B2B, like those tools are harder than just doing a traditional B2C Shopify site. So if you want to have good foundational B2B commerce and marketing, like it could be in some cases I'd say 1 to 3 year kind of foundational journey. And that's not what these like a lot of these people like they're like, oh, we got to get results in 6 months or 3 months. And it's like, well, you don't even have HubSpot or you don't even have, you're not even using a CRM. You don't, your data sucks. Like getting the foundation in place across, in some of these cases, I think it's multiple systems can often be a multi-year. And then I think to your point, the clients I find that are most successful that we work with are the ones that are like really willing to take the multi-year journey and like invest in these things long term and eventually all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, we have this like foundation and there's something here. But the ones that are kind of like the fast results, it's tough when there's no foundation. And I think it's probably pretty rare that you find a good foundation, I would imagine, with any client that like a new client that you're not working with.
It's very rare. In fact, in the book, I mention of the hundreds of companies we've worked with over the last 20 plus years, not a single one to this day has handed us an existing marketing strategy in writing and said, can you help us implement it? Um, so yeah, it's, but
I think
Isaiah, I think you nailed it. Not a lot of companies want that immediate ROI. So they jump into
yeah.
tactics. And really what they're getting is a Band-Aid
Hmm.
on a larger system implementation that they really need to
Yeah.
implement if they want long-term growth and
Well,
success.
I think there's kind of two problems in B2B, well, two or three core problems in B2B. And one is, and I want to talk about this as well, that the lack of like, you talk about strategy, brand, like a modern brand digital strategy. And what I mean by that is like, appealing to your audience in somewhat of a digitally first way, not just sending an army of sales reps, which I think is just at this point going to become too expensive to compete that
Yeah.
way. Um, and then
and no
second
one
is
will
this, yeah,
expect that anymore. No one expects that
yeah.
anymore.
I mean,
And
you couldn't even, you couldn't even come to like, if you knocked on our door and tried to cold call us, we wouldn't answer because we don't have a doorbell. Like, we wouldn't know that you're there. So it would be impossible to, cold show up at our door. You can cold email us and pretty generally ineffective. And honestly, a lot of that I think needs to be coupled with content, or we're actually getting into a little bit of account-based marketing, but we're doing it in tandem with like digital marketing and blog posts and like things that are like I think a little bit more useful than just like a traditional just email, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, let's come back to the foundational piece, but I find that most B2B companies for the most, I mean there's always exceptions. When I talk to them, they haven't updated their branding in forever. They're not like if you ask them like, well, why, like why should why do I even buy from you? Like, what's your value prop? It's like a pretty weak answer. Like it might be like, oh, well, we have like good service and like,
we're nice
like,
people.
yeah, we're nice people. We have good service and we have good client relationships and just like these very like generic answers that to me, it's like, that's not a compelling strategy, especially from a digital like first perspective, which I think everything is moving digital. Funny anecdote. I recently just got a new Tesla, or I'm leasing it because I sold my car, and it basically can drive me to work 100%. Like, I don't think I think it's there. I think like the only reason I can't truly have self-driving is the regulation. But I felt pretty confident that it could self-drive me here. Like the tech, like if we have that technology, like the level of automation it's going
Yeah.
to be scary soon, right? And so, anyways, what do you find when you ask these companies, okay, what's your value pop? What's your strategy? What's your brand? Like, what do they answer? Do you get much back or?
On occasion, we'll get a company that really understands how they're unique in the marketplace, but it's pretty rare. But we get a lot of comments like you just mentioned. Well, we have the best people, or our people added up equal 100 years of industry experience.
And probably every
Or,
distributor and manufacturer can say the same thing, right? In the space,
yeah,
My favorite. But if the company is listening, I'm not even going to apologize to them. Their slogan was, "We deliver excellence." I'm like, well, good for you. Good for you. Right?
Yeah, it reminds me of I want to say it's like Ferguson. They had like legit TV commercials that like were so bad, and they were like, people buy from people. It was like they're trying to basically like convince you that people still want to do business like it's 1995. And it's like, no, that's just, at the very
I'd
least,
rather buy from a monkey. I'd
yeah,
rather buy.
you're not helping yourself with like the under 40 demographic. At least that demographic, I could tell you that. For the advertising,
Anyway.
I wish I had I could throw up one of those commercials right now, but
no, it's
so
so common. Yeah.
is that where you start with like just trying to understand their brand or what's their strategy, or before we
It's
even talk about foundation, right?
it's pretty high on the list, but the first pillar, and we wrote the pillars in order of what we felt are importance. Number one is setting a goal, an ROI driven goal. So if you talk to most industrial companies, we'll say, well, why are you doing marketing? Well, we want more leads, or we want to rank higher, or
Yeah.
we want more of this. So we're going to say, well, let's tie that first to return on investment. So
Yeah.
let's build out what we call a 10x ROI. And it's a pretty easy calculation. You just add up all of your marketing investment spend, multiply it by 10. And that's the goal. Now, do all companies get a 10x? No.
There's a revenue goal, you mean? So 10x revenue of the cost, essentially. Yeah.
The goal is to get 10x ROI, return on investment. So that would be, after whatever their profit margins are.
Oh, so you're even looking at margin.
Yep.
Yeah.
10x on the margin and after all the cost of the marketing spend. Wow.
Yeah. That's the objective. Some companies will get a 2x or a 3x, which is still pretty great.
Yeah.
And then we had one client that got a 27x ROI.
Wow.
Were they negative before, or what?
In the first year? Well, they were negative before, but it was a 27x ROI on the investment they made with us.
Okay.
So it was
Excellent.
it was an apples to apples. Yeah. So 10x ROI goal. So you create the goal first. Now we know what we're striving for, right? Now we know what marketing's objective is and how to accurately measure it. So like a SMART goal. And then the pillar number 2 is value proposition, messaging, and branding. And to your point, Isaiah, it's number 2 for a reason. And it's because we experienced a number of clients years ago that we were helping to drive a lot of leads for and brand awareness. And they're getting all these inbound leads and they weren't converting them into sales.
Because there's no value prop. There wasn't a compelling, there's no reason to buy,
Yep.
Yeah. And it also ties back to the pillar number 6, which is your tech stack, which is, if you don't have that, and you already mentioned this, if you don't have that CRM in place and you don't have the tools to tie this all together, how are you to know whether you have a value prop issue or a pricing issue or a sales issue, a closing issue? So that's what we work with our customers on, is to really see that whole picture so that you can fix the problem and not guess at it.
Um,
So, so just a quick question then. So if we're going through these things in order and a client number one comes up to you and they don't have pillar one in place, you're saying to them, before we go further, we're going to do everything in pillar one. And then, okay, we've achieved that. Now pillar two, or things happening simultaneously with the client where they don't really have anything in place.
So every new client we bring on board, there's typically a 30 to 60 day strategic development process that we go through. And that includes building out their marketing strategy, their ideal customer profiles, their buyer personas. We build out a revised and enhanced value proposition and the story behind it. And it also includes that 10x ROI goal. So that when we start implementing the tactical part of the program, we've already got the foundation for everything else behind it. And then in those first couple months, we're also implementing or modifying their tech stack.
do you often want them to do a rebrand in that process? Do you ever feel like that's a necessary part of, step one or two, or maybe the next steps if you don't feel like the brand represents all of those things?
It depends. My background was corporate identity and branding before I started this. So I'm a little biased on it, but we lean more towards not rebranding unless it's really bad.
Okay.
Because I've seen great companies with really crappy brands or visual brands like logos and look and feel. We may redo their website or, create a better experience through visual communications, but rarely do we say you've got to change your logo.
I also imagine in some of the, especially in industrial, the quality of the logo is not quite, it's not as important as like a CPG firm and, the packaging you see in the store and things like that. So that makes sense. Um, and
On
then,
occasion, if they're like doing some brand consolidation between multiple companies, if they're in mergers and acquisitions, and we have an opportunity to present a new front, for the general public and their past customers, so that they're telling a consistent story, then in that case, a new visual brand like a logo might be required.
so what do you do if people like, and I'd imagine that you come across this quite often and maybe you just say no, like people that just aren't willing to do this, right? Like they're like, oh, we need SEO, or, they're looking for that quick fix. And you're like, well, we need 2 months to just build the ROI model, get through steps one and two or whatever. I know you said 30 to 60 days, but we all know it often spills into the 60 days with these kind of things. So, does that come up a lot where they're just not willing to take the time to do things right, and you just have to turn them away, or what do you do, I guess?
Surprisingly, it comes up less than you'd think. Usually when we first talk to them, they're like, hey, we want SEO. We want to rank number one for this.
Yeah.
Or,
They're coming for a
we need
tactic.
to,
They're coming for a tactic usually. Yeah.
and when we explain why we're doing what we're doing and the long-term benefits of it, usually it's not an issue at all. The only time that we will work with a company and not do the strategy up front is if it's like a website project. Because we can build that website independent of the overall marketing strategy as long as we have a strategy built for the website. So that'll often be like an introduction into that company. We'll build that website, and then we'll say, okay, now that we've got the website built, how are we going to monitor the website's success? What's your visitor to lead conversion rates? How are people engaging with the site using analytics and data to illustrate that?
So, of the type of companies you work with, what's the stage that most of them are in? Are a lot of them startups, or a lot of them kind of somewhere midstream and they're stuck? I mean, what is the story with a lot of the majority of the companies you work with?
So we work with companies anywhere from 5 million in revenue up to over $1 billion. So we don't really look at revenue size. Typically, the companies that are working with us have been in business for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, some of them are family owned, fourth generation, 100-year-old companies. So we don't really look at those areas. What we're best at SyncShow is helping marketing immature, or what we call marketing foundational companies, to become marketing mature. So our goal is to work with them to help them really build out this infrastructure, help them drive revenues, work very closely with their sales leadership, and have one RevOps team for success for the long term. And our customers tend to stay with us for 4, 6, 10 plus years.
Wow. When you start getting into the foundational stuff, do you find that sometimes they have a couple pieces like, oh, you know, they have WordPress, which is fine, we'll keep WordPress. Or it's more often than not, you have to throw everything away. I guess I know it's going to be different every time, but I'm just curious how much is like salvageable of what they have.
Yeah, it depends. So that's a great question. You know, some of our clients have no marketing staff at all, and we become their entire outsourced team. Others, you know, some of the bigger companies have a whole marketing staff, and we supplement. On the same note, they may have a really strong website, or maybe the website's okay and it's built on another technology. Our goal isn't to just come in and replace everything. Our goal is to not recreate the wheel, but to drive value as quickly as we can. So like if they have a mediocre WordPress website, we may say, hey, listen, we'll do a website analysis. And I think it's important for me to mention, in the book, across those 8 pillars, we've identified over 100 gold standards. And so those gold standards are industry best practices, Google best practices, website best practices. And so when we start working with a company, we will look at all those different areas and assess them against the gold standards. And so like Isaiah, you mentioned like WordPress as an example. So let's just say they have a mediocre WordPress website. We may say, hey, here's how your website compares against the gold standards. We recommend we maybe make some minor updates to certain areas of the site as a Band-Aid until we get everything up and running. Or maybe it's a great site and we just need to integrate it with HubSpot or do some of those things. It really just depends on the organization's goals and what they're trying to achieve.
So do you have all of these gold standards kind of documented for any category, or sometimes you get a new business in and you've never worked in that category before? I mean, at this point, like how broad is the experience you have?
So the gold standards are for all B2B businesses. And so we look at, you know, marketing strategy gold standards, value proposition, branding, and messaging gold standards, website gold standards. There's gold standards for your marketing team. So every one of the 8 pillars has gold standards assigned to it, which work for any B2B company. And we actually have a whole
So even like SaaS versus...
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying like SaaS versus like a screw manufacturer. I mean, really, you do it all.
Correct. And on our website at g8p.co, we actually have, it's a very high level gold standards assessment that you can take for free. But for our clients, and once we get into the consulting and actually working with them, we have a more sophisticated online software that we've created that will give them a gold standard score. And then as we adjust and, you know, build out their operational infrastructure for marketing, we'll be able to check off those gold standards and that score comes up.
Interesting. Have you guys, how much of this ever ties into e-commerce, or is that an area where you're getting, you know, manufacturers and distributors asking, okay, we got to bring more of this business online and not process all these orders, you know, the old way? How much of that is happening? I know that like technical work isn't necessarily your core focus, but
yeah, so we don't do e-commerce work at all here at SyncShow. It's not an area of our expertise. We are seeing an increased need for it across our customer base, especially our manufacturers and our transportation and logistics clients. So they're asking about e-commerce. Some of them have transitioned over, but we typically don't get involved on the technical side of e-com.
Gotcha. What about distribution? What about, because I would imagine the distributor clients also need to get uh, some level of their product data online.
So they do distribution, warehousing. They're a bit different. They've typically got like a TMS system or some kind of warehousing system in place, would be a third-party software. A lot of their customers are not engaging directly through like an e-commerce, like a Shopify or BigCommerce type of implementation. Not saying they can't, but we just don't get involved in that.
Yeah, gotcha. A lot of these are also like portals, right? So it depends
Right.
on the B2B company, right? Some will have open sites that anyone can go to, but some will have, we're talking one where it's like you would only be able to use it if you were an active customer,
With a
right?
yeah,
And
username
so,
and password to get in, right?
yeah, so it wouldn't be really relevant from like a lead gen marketing perspective. So, but then they have a separate B2C website because they also have a B2C channel. And then actually, we haven't really talked to them, but it'd be interesting to hear how they acquire B2B customers, but they're pretty popular brands. So my guess is they get a lot of organic interest. But cool. So um, as you're going along, how long on average does it take the company generally to get through these 8 pillars? I know it obviously depends on the size and the maturity, but is there like, I'm sure people ask you like, okay, well, is this like a year, 2 years? Like what are they usually expecting?
So it does depend on their adoption of the RevOps model to integrate marketing with their sales team. But in general, it takes about a year to get all the foundational elements in place, up and running. Now, keep in mind, that does not mean that you have to wait a year to start getting leads and see the positive effects of marketing. Typically, we're going to start implementing the marketing strategy in month 3 or 4. But to get that whole infrastructure in place to where now you've got a repeatable system, about a year.
That makes sense. And
So
so,
for
yeah, go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Isaiah. I'll let
I
you
was just
finish
gonna
first.
say, I mean, it makes sense, right? It's a year, but people are looking for that fat. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff, it's a 2 to 3 year investment, right? Because often, especially with the work we do, the first year is about getting foundational stuff in place, and I think that's the problem is people are looking for that fast, 3, 6 month ROI, which is just not really the best way to go about these things. So, anyways, kind of repeating myself here, but go ahead.
No, I'll just say I agree with you, but what I always tell clients is that everything is ongoing, right? Like they say, oh, can we get this done in 3 months and this done in six? It's like everything's ongoing. Like just
Yeah,
let's get a different,
yeah.
process in place, a different attitude in place. And once you have that attitude in place, then everything will improve. I mean, it really isn't just like something ends in 18 months and then you're done and you go on vacation, right? It's not like that happens, right? So what I was going to
Yeah.
ask Chris, and you can respond to that too, is that for our listeners, I'm hoping you could just like say out loud what the 8 pillars are, just to make sure everybody hears them, and so that they know that they can go, to your site and to your book and all that. I just want to make sure people have it in this podcast as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll just run through them real quick then.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
number one, having a 10x ROI marketing goal. Number two is value proposition, messaging, and branding. So, making
Mm-hmm.
sure that your story is squared away. Number three is your marketing strategy. And specifically in the book, we map out a 12-month marketing strategy with a tactical implementation plan, a marketing calendar, and a 3-year vision for where your marketing and the entire Great 8 Pillars approach is going. So you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking in the future. Number four is your marketing team structure. Do you have the right people in the right seats to pull off your strategy? And we outline exactly the different types of roles you need to have based on your budgets in the book. Number five is what we call the almighty website. So do you have a website built for lead generation and customer attraction, or is it an online brochure? Number six is going to be your analytics and reporting. So do you have the proper data and information that you need to make educated decisions moving forward? how do you get those? And then what do your reports look like? And who should be getting those reports at the leadership level? And what's the cadence of those reports? To make sure that marketing is, if you're going to have an ROI driven marketing program and your company is spending, whether it's 50 grand or 500,000 a year on marketing, leadership wants to know how it's doing. So those reports are critical. Number 7 is your tech stack. So primarily what we're looking for is your CRM and your marketing automation platform and the analytics tools to be integrated so that you can see how
the layer on top of the website, because some people might look at the website as the tech stack as well, but you're looking at it as kind of a level beyond the website, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah, they'd be integrated. Like I think you guys are familiar with HubSpot as well. So
Yeah,
Of course, yeah.
like if you're on a WordPress website, that website has to be integrated with HubSpot. HubSpot has to be integrated if you're using Salesforce or if you're using HubSpot's CRM. So just having all those pieces tied together. And then last but not least is a pillar we call templates and guides. This is pretty basic, but it's, if you're in any industry, you don't want to be rebuilding from scratch everything that you're using. So how can you templatize or use guides for instructions so that you're the most efficient and effective, which will enhance your ROI?
I assume these would be like email marketing templates or like, even sales material templates, just kind of, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like website pages, social media best practices, blog best practices.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting, Chris, is that I work with a lot of startups at this point. I work with investors, and then they're like, let's figure out the plan and the strategy for these startups, right? So a lot of it is, again, referencing essentially your 8 pillars. But we do that. Number 8 is a very important piece where it's like, well, what is the brand guide? What is the marketing guide? What is the sales guide? What is the right? All of these different guides. So because the business has to have a life and people come and go, and you have to figure out like what are the standards that you're coming back to. So that really, I love that point. I'm glad that you have it in there.
Yeah, I mean it's critical, and it usually goes unnoticed. A lot of marketers don't think about those things, but I mean this is another throughput efficiency, part of the equation. And really, if you boil it all down, what we're talking about is making marketing a business operational infrastructure.
Yeah.
And just following good business practices.
And I think that a lot of B2B companies struggle with this, especially in like traditional. I think most like B2B SaaS companies are like, they get it. Maybe they struggle with it, but like it's hard in general. But like they're built to be a digital marketing, engine because they generate leads online generally. But I think like manufacturing, distribution, and companies that most of them started before the internet, right? It's like they aren't used to lead generation this way, right? They're thinking of it as like they generated, I think, historically, probably a lot of leads through direct sales relationships, right? Or even direct mail, or just a lot of tactics
Trade shows,
yeah, trade shows, exactly. Yeah, it's just different tactics, right? And so, do you run up against the culture issue around this, or like when you're working on the team model, for instance, like they're like, oh, we can't hire that, or they don't have the people, and then you have to fill in those gaps. Like what kind of, I'd imagine that that could be a big problem. I guess pillar number 4.
Yeah, the team structure isn't really an issue. When we talk about the overall investment in marketing, the number one question I get asked for B2B industrial companies is, does marketing really work for B2B industrial companies? And
Yes.
it's a frustrating question, but it goes back to what you were saying, Isaiah. It's more of that old school mindset because it's not the way they did business for the last 50 to 100 years. And I like to always rephrase it. And when I rephrase it, it tends to get them going, oh, okay, I get it now. And don't think of it as marketing, think of it as communications. So how are you communicating with your general public, your employees, your prospects, and your customers? And is there an opportunity to improve your communications with any of those groups? And if the answer is yes, then that's marketing. To improve revenues while doing that is marketing. So let's think about this as communications and how we're communicating and creating experiences with the people that your business comes into contact with. It's really all it is.
Yep. And so when you said the people is not always an issue, are they usually willing to hire the right people, or is it transitioning the people into the right roles? I mean, what kind of gaps do you find there usually?
So we don't ask our clients to hire anybody. If they have an internal staff, like 1 or 2 people, great. Let's leverage them to the best of their capabilities and complement them. I'd say half of our customers have no internal marketing folks. We work directly with VP of sales.
Wow.
And we become their marketing department. We become their chief marketing officer, their project managers, their tactical, implementers.
How do you handle the content around that, the subject matter expertise?
That's probably the most difficult area. We definitely require our customers to provide subject matter experts. We can interview them. We can write draft copy on specific topics, but it's probably the number one area where they say, hey, you're the marketing expert. Why can't you write about this highly complex engineered product that somebody has an MBA on in engineering? And I'm like, we're marketing experts, but you guys are experts in what you do.
How much do you use AI?
We're using it more and more, but not as much as people think. In fact, I just had a conversation this morning with a gentleman on the same topic. We are using AI to help us generate ideas and some structures for content and some guidelines, but because of the industries our customers are in that are highly specialized and, like I said, like highly engineered in many cases, we'll use it as a guide or a rough draft, but we really need our clients and the human to have input. And to prove this, Tim, we actually launched, we have an AI task force here at Sync Show. Mm-hmm. And we launched a series of blog articles a couple months ago. And we tested human-based articles versus AI-based articles. And the human-based articles had a higher ROI and engagement rate than the AI ones. So we're still playing with it. We're still testing it.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with some people who are doing those types of tests as well. And it may not surprise listeners, but a lot of that is they're getting closer and closer, depending on how you're training your AI. Because if you're using internal data, for example, a company I work with who's using a library of documents for sales, for marketing, for blog posts, for years of content. When they had all of the AI, their personal AI trained with that, it could actually write very good, convincing content, right? Yeah. When you're coming at it more cold, say, write like this, or here's one example, it's really not going to be anywhere near comparable to what a human can do.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. And what I would also urge listeners who are listening to this thinking about content, it's really important that that your brand think about a content strategy and how your content is being used and what the goal of that content is. There's a big difference between writing an article for search engine optimization value versus thought leadership value. And you have to consider your brand voice for your organization. Is all the content that you create following one brand voice where you talk the same, where you use the same industry terms, where you have specific capitalizations and references that's unique to your company. And you can train AI to do some of that. But if you really want thought leadership, expert knowledge that's like industry researched, then the human's going to be the best way to do that, at least for now.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think the one exception I've seen. Just I'm going to put this out there just to be like crazy because it's funny that it's true. I was working with a team of engineers at a B2B company, and they have all of these spec sheets, right? And they appear in some product descriptions or whatnot. Well, when you load those into an AI, and you're asking like to get something out of it, you're often getting thought leadership out of it because they never looked at it that way, right?
Yeah.
They wrote it for one purpose and it's just being used for another purpose. So sometimes you can get exactly what you're trying to achieve, but it's going to take a long time for people to figure all this out and to do it right. You need the humans right now.
Well, I
You
think
really,
that's
really need the humans.
probably one of the hardest parts about marketing in general, especially for B2B, is that generally you're trying to market a pretty like deep level of expertise in a certain area. For us, it's often like e-commerce, technical knowledge, or just, general e-commerce knowledge, but at a pretty like in-depth level, not like those like basic Forbes articles. You'll see like, some basic article about like Shopify, and it's like, you know, we're trying to go way more in depth to provide, value and demonstrate our level of expertise. But the marketing people from don't usually have that knowledge, right? Because they're not the ones doing the projects themselves or being the UX designer or whatever. And so I think that's probably one of the hardest problems is getting the subject matter expertise into like a marketing format,
Yeah.
right? And so, what are some of the ways that you mentioned interviews? I think those can go pretty well. What are some of the ways that you do that?
So it all depends on, like I mentioned, the goal of the piece of content. So if it is going to be more search engine optimization based, then a lot of that we can write internally with a customer doing a quick approval. But if it is going to be more of a thought leadership piece, we're going to interview a thought leader at that organization. Usually, he's going to go through multiple rounds of revisions. We're also going to do a lot of research on our end within the industry. So, and those can cost a lot more to do too. It's not just a simple blog article. Now you're writing a white paper or a strategic piece that's going to help differentiate the client.
How often do you think it's worth, do you mix that up, right? Like, obviously you probably have a mix of both, but how do you determine when they should do one or the other?
So it's really based on a number of different factors. One would be the level of marketing maturity of that organization and what the priority would be for more of a thought leadership piece versus foundational. A lot of times what we're doing with our customers is we're trying to say, hey, let's look at this full strategy. Let's look at where you are today and where you want to be. And they will make a list of all the assets that they need in place to really be what we call marketing foundations versus marketing immature. And so maybe we say, hey, you have to have a certain number of thought leadership pieces in your quiver. So it really depends. And if they already have a lot of those from past efforts, then we can either massage them or leave them as is.
So yeah, I mean, and I'm sure this has changed, in recent years. But when I was temporary head of a content agency a little while back, and one of the things that we used to do for bigger clients, and I don't think they'll care if I mention it, but like Norton, Symantec and Norton before they split, was creating content at all those different levels. So we would have PhDs writing white papers, with their internal teams, and then we would have, all of the other levels of content and deliver that on a monthly basis for all these different purposes. And so I think it's just kind of it's a good approach to always think in that way. You sometimes need, the thing at the very, very top, expert level, but you don't always. You really don't.
Yeah, and like, well, when you're thinking about a company like Norton Symantec, back then, thought leadership is critical, because they are an industry leader.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you get a small tool and die shop that's serving a 500-mile radius of their headquarters, it's a little different. So it all comes into play.
Yeah.
Each company's,
it makes sense, right? Like, is thought leadership necessary if you're really just trying to, service a local radius? And to me, it's like probably local marketing is more important, and then, local SEO, and there's just different things that you might do for that. And so, no, that's super interesting. It's it's definitely interesting to see how you guys are able to like basically uh get pretty far without necessarily being the subject matter experts yourself. That was one of the things, we focus more on performance marketing ads because with e-commerce you can it's fairly easy to demonstrate pretty high ROI and scale with these marketing channels. But something we don't do a lot of is like content creation for clients in terms of like written content. So, and part of that is because it's challenging, I think, to get the subject matter expertise, across. And we work with like a lot of different industries. So,
So I have a question going in a slightly different angle because you had mentioned, we had talked about the marketing team, right? And you're acting in a certain role for people who don't have any of these internal resources. Yeah, but I was also thinking about you saying that your dad was a turnaround expert, right? A lot of it, right? So I'm thinking like a lot of companies that I work with, they'll say, I'll get hired at a certain level. Like I'll get brought in by the board, for example, and they'll say, assess the company and tell us who we need to shift out or should need to shift around or whatever. It gets to be really, crazy. Do you get in those situations as well where you're saying that team's got to go and we've got to, you got to put the clock on it and figure out how to replace it?
No, we work with quite a few companies in our client portfolio that are private equity backed, or they're holding companies. So they've got, multiple companies underneath their corporate umbrella. We don't really position ourselves in the place where we're going to make recommendations on staffing. Where we feel where our mission and where we're best suited is when let's build that marketing strategy. Let's put the goals together. Let's give you the reports, and let's let the data inform where the issues are, and then the client can make decisions. So I'll give you an example, Tim. We were working with a company last year, manufacturing company, and their marketing budget that they had was very low. And as with most companies or many companies, their expectations were very high.
Lowest retainer,
Yes,
like
we've heard that
lowest
many
retainer,
times.
smallest client with the highest expectations.
It was
I have
almost exactly
$1,000.
that.
Can I make millions?
Yeah.
Regardless, they're local and they're good people, and we wanted to really provide a lot of value. So we had driven over $2 million in pipeline revenue for them over an 18-month period. And keep in mind, this is not a big company.
Yeah.
But they didn't close any of the leads.
I was going to say, keep in mind pipeline, and not close one. We look at that all the time. We're like, our pipeline, if we had 100% close rate, we'd be extremely rich people.
But they also told us when we first started working with them 18 months earlier that they had a 36-month sales cycle.
Oh, wow.
And so
you mind telling us what they do, or can you give us a little, like, what is that? What is a 30? Why is that? Yeah. What are they selling?
Is that government defense?
So they were in the tool and die metal fabrication business. And they were going for some bigger, heavier hitting customers.
Gotcha. And they're planned out future projects kind of thing. Is that why it's?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, because we had the data in place, we were able to identify, and the tools, their whole tech stack, we were able to identify by working with their VP of sales was that he said, hey, these leads are great. These are qualified leads. They meet our buyer personas and they meet our customer, ideal customer profile, and they want to buy. We also were able to identify that they had a 3% quote to sale close rate in their CRM.
Overall, just historically. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really poor in their industry.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
So again, getting back to Tim's question about making recommendations on staffing, we didn't have to make any recommendations there. the
Okay.
data showed where their issue was.
Got it.
Do you run into issues with the sales leaders or, there's their conflict there?
No, we used to, like, years and years ago. But we approach it very differently now, where we're going in and we're part of the sales team. We report to the VP of sales.
Yeah, makes sense.
Most of our customers. Yeah, we're there to support them and make them successful.
Okay.
So in the case of someone like this, how do you handle an ROI model? I assume that it has to be a long ROI model, right? How are you going to get results in a year when the, the sales cycle is 36 months? Like
It's pretty rare that the sales cycle is out that long, but which is more of an indication of something was wrong in that organization's sales operational infrastructure. But I tell every client when we first start working with them is, if you're expecting results in 6 months, don't hire us, because you're not going to get it. I'll tell you right now, you're not going to get it. However, within the first 6 to 9 months, you should start to see upward trends on all the key performance indicators that we're tracking, which are tied to your ROI goals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if after that you're not seeing results, then cancel. Then it's our issue. We did something wrong, and that just doesn't happen. So.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So do you have other? You mentioned HubSpot, right? I mean, do you have other favorites in the tech stack that you want to call out, or things, for example, in the analytics and reporting side? Because I certainly have favorites depending on the client or what they're up to. What kinds of things do you see, or what do you recommend?
We're doing what we're not supposed to do, which is like the tactics of buying this tool will solve the problem. But it is
No. We don't want that.
Yeah, but it is a good podcast topic. So
it is. People want to know. They want to know.
Well, I'm a big believer in HubSpot, especially we use HubSpot at Trellis, and
I like HubSpot.
I think for mid-market companies, it's I think generally probably the go-to CRM. There's always exceptions, but outside of HubSpot, what else are you seeing as even also on the website side? Is it do you like WordPress, like Webflow? I'm curious.
So we're somewhat agnostic to technology as long as it works and it's integrated. We require HubSpot Marketing Hub for our services. So we don't work with any other marketing automation platform.
Okay.
Many of our customers.
Is that ever a blocker if they have something else? Do you run into that sometimes?
We qualify that pretty early on in the conversation. So if they're like on like Marketing Cloud, or they're on Pardot, or I'm drawing blanks now on some of the others, Acton, or we run into a couple different platforms. Usually we'll say right up front, like, hey, we require HubSpot. We only use HubSpot. We believe it's the best tool. And if they're not willing to make that switch, or if they're really engaged in this other platform, then typically it's just not a fit for us.
Gotcha. So that's a qualifying piece for you.
Okay.
But on the CRM side,
I don't want to derail, but I do have to ask: is Google acquiring HubSpot? Is that dead? That was a big.
Dead.
Okay, good. That's scary. I'm like, I like HubSpot right now. I'm happy with where we're at. I really don't want it to be. I mean, we have GC'd as well, but I did not want that to happen.
I heard it had fallen apart, but I've also heard rumors that Amazon was interested in HubSpot, and another tech company.
Well, Adobe was going to acquire Figma, and I was like, oh man, But luckily that didn't happen either. I'm sick of these big. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry. So outside of HubSpot, which I think we all agree is a great tool, we're also Boston people. So
no, I think as far as like I said, we're big pro HubSpot fans and platinum partners, but as far as like CRM, I don't really care as long as they're using it and it integrates with HubSpot. As long as we can connect the dots through an API or some other connection. If they're using Salesforce or another third-party CRM, I don't care as long as we can track revenue attribution.
What about analytics? Do you like things Tableau? What do you like?
GA4.
Yeah, we use GA4 a lot. We use DataBox to aggregate a lot of the data into one hub. For search engine optimization, we use SEO Moz.
Sure.
I'm surprised Moz has
SEM
been around
Rush.
forever. Oh yeah, I was going to ask SEM Rush. Do they overlap a lot sometimes, or do you often use
Yeah.
Moz and SEM Rush? I find that sometimes
You
it's
know,
a lot.
you
Yeah.
probably have to ask our head of SEO because I'm not
Yeah.
too involved in that, but they switch back and forth, I believe.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. He has a book out. It was interesting because the founder's gone from Moz. But he talks about that journey, and then Ahrefs, they came
Ahrefs,
in.
we use that too. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a mix of, good SEO software, marketing automation tool like HubSpot, some sort of analytics platform like GA4. Is there anything else that's like kind of critical? And then obviously website is WordPress the most common for you guys or?
So if we're going to build a website, 90% of the time it's going to be on HubSpot's CMS.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask
Okay.
that.
But we also develop in WordPress. So we give our clients a choice, and then we link them all out to third-party research and reviews and say, you make the choice between WordPress and HubSpot.
Yeah. You don't want to force them. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if they don't like the website, it's kind of their choice, right? Or the platform.
Well,
Yeah.
I think a lot of our customers don't really understand website technology or the backbone, the content
No.
management system. So they hear of WordPress, but and they think of it as cheaper. And then they look at HubSpot and they go, "Oh my gosh, this costs this much." And I'm like, "Well, if you actually look at the total cost of ownership on your website and what HubSpot provides versus a WordPress site with the appropriate WordPress hosting and your security,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's going to even out."
WordPress
Oh,
is
yeah.
really becoming, I would say, in some ways, more of an enterprise platform, mid-market to enterprise, like to really justify it. I mean, I always tell people if people starting companies that, they have no money, right? And I'm like, just go with Squarespace. Like, just pay $20 a month, like install the
Yeah.
template that you like, change the colors and the picture. Like, these people can't afford, an agency to build a
Yeah.
WordPress site, right? And it's like, so, I'm in full agreement with you. How has the HubSpot CMS been? Has it been getting better? I haven't used it in a while. Well, actually, we use it a little bit for landing pages, but they're more embedded into our site's pretty sophisticated, so it's not the normal way of using it. But how has it been as of late? Because I know it was pretty basic a while ago, but I'm sure it's a lot better now.
Yeah, they made some major changes. So they don't call it the HubSpot CMS anymore. They call it the Content Hub.
Mm,
So
okay.
they moved the CMS and the blog capabilities and some other features all into one. I love it. I think I'm not a programmer. I can go in and edit our website if I need to, and it handles everything, and it's pretty intuitive. And now it's got a pretty robust online marketplace where you can buy templates, and those templates are getting much, much better as far as programming code, and so it's pretty robust.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, this is
Excellent. So I have a different sort of. Oh, sorry, Isaiah. Go ahead.
no. I'm just conscious of time. I know we're gonna have to wrap up, so that's all.
I had one more question, and then I could throw it back for wrap up. So, given I love Pillar 8, and I'm going to go back to that for 1 second. The templates and guides.
Yeah.
What a lot of companies do is they turn that kind of stuff into educational material for either their industry or just for their employees. Do you do anything in the educational space, the company corporate training space?
We don't. We've done it for some select clients through HubSpot. HubSpot has the Knowledge Hub.
Yep.
We've created a whole online library and online education and training courses like through that. In fact, we built our own. So it's not a real area that we play in. It's not where our wheelhouse is. But for select clients, if they have specific needs, we'll help them build that out.
Cool. Cool. We might as well give you the last word as we get ready to wrap up here. So, is there something else that you would like to tell, our millions
Well,
of listeners
how do
around
they
the
find your
world?
book, or how do they
That
find
what
these 8 pillars? how
How
do
do they
they?
find you in the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Great 8 Pillars of ROI Driven Marketing, it's on Amazon. The book is written specifically for manufacturing companies. However, in about 45 days, I'm publishing a new book that's for all B2B companies.
Mm.
The methodology is the same. It's just all the case studies and the stories are more for B2B in general.
And what will that be called?
It's going to be called The Great 8 Pillars as well, just for B2B companies versus manufacturing.
Got
Well,
it.
it's going to take us a couple
Excellent.
weeks to get this out. Actually, our core marketing person's going on maternity leave, so we're probably going to be a little backlogged, but hopefully we'll be. I would love to promote this episode alongside the new book and
That'd be awesome.
I
get
hope
that
that
knowledge
the
out
new
there.
baby on maternity leave, I hope the new baby is named Isaiah, Timothy, or Chris.
Yeah, there's a decent chance as if it's a boy, we've got a
You
chance.
never know. You never know. Chris can be
This could be
honest.
either.
I love it.
Yeah, and the middle name will be the 8 pillars of B2B marketing,
That's right. Chris, 8 pillars. That's perfect. I love it. Well, Chris, Chris Peer, thank you so much for being our guest today. This is really great. We don't talk about marketing enough, and
Yeah.
I'm a marketer. We all love marketing, but we don't talk about it enough. So we're really, really glad to have you today.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.